Let's talk some chess. This game was played about a year ago. Magnus Carlsen is streaming with a group of friends, as he often does, and it's sort of a late night party situation. I'll link the video below so you can see what I mean. The music's going, everybody's having a good time. It looks like people are sort of at a party, except unlike a normal party, perhaps, people are playing chess. I think that's what makes Magnus so great is he likes to have fun, but chess is such a big and genuinely joyful part of his life. In this situation, it's a hyperbolic game, so both sides have 30 seconds, and someone else with the white pieces has actually gotten into this sort of conundrum where the knight has been taken by the pawn on f3. So already white is down a knight, and this is a completely losing position, especially with 24 seconds left on the clock, which the time was at when Magnus took over, and we'll see what Magnus can do late at night, down a knight, against an excellent player, as the handle of this player indicates they are a GM. So we'll see what Magnus can do. He starts with queen to d2, getting the queen off of the back rank. And now pawn takes on g2. Just, you're going to lose this pawn most likely, so you might as well take another pawn with it. So pawn takes, bishop takes, fianchettoing the bishop, and now attacking this d5 pawn, which is protected by the queen for the moment. But that protection goes away, albeit with check with queen to h4. So the queen is checking the king. Here, Magnus blocks the queen on f2. And now, again, we're not going to judge these moves too much because it's a hyperbolic game. Basically no time on the clock for either player, but here the player with the black pieces takes the pawn on h2 with the queen, which is obviously a terrible mistake, and Magnus happily takes it with the rook on h2. So again, not the most technically sound, strategic, sharply played game, but it's a hyperbolic game, so we're going to cut these guys some slack. So knight to f6, and now c4 by Magnus, expanding on the queen side, and knight to e4 with the black pieces, getting this knight on a very powerful e4 square, coming with an attack on the queen, and now there are no pawns that can kick this knight away. And Magnus, as if to acknowledge that the black queen was given away on h2, decides to sacrifice his own queen on f2 and just plays knight to c3, attacking this knight and this pawn, but obviously giving away his queen on f2. His opponent happily takes the queen, so knight takes, and then king takes on f2, and now c6 with the black pieces. Here a better move is d takes on c4, sort of not allowing the c file to open up and Magnus to generate an attack. We'll see why it's important to have a pawn on d5 in a moment. I'm sorry, we'll see why it's important to have this, that's not what I meant to say. We'll see why it's important to have the c file sort of closed in a moment, but in any case c6, and now Magnus trades on d5. Pawn takes on d5, and now e4, Magnus pushing in the center with his 3 pawns. Wants to open the way for this light squared bishop, which will become quite important when this pawn on d5 has been removed. So e4 is played, and now knight to a6 with black pieces, knight takes on d5, the pawn is undefended, and now this is a super powerful knight, no pawns can kick this knight away, and the knight is controlling a ton of different squares, so that's great for Magnus. Knight to c7, challenging now this knight. But this is not a very good challenge because you can just take the knight and fork the king and the rook. Magnus maybe didn't see it or didn't want to play it. I'm sure he saw it. But again, hyperbolic game, so not a lot of time for either of these players. Instead, Magnus plays e5, just pushing these pawns. Maybe he thought it was more fun. Looks like a knight sacrifice, but if knight takes knight, then bishop takes knight. Don't forget about this bishop on g2. So e5 is played, king now to d8. Probably saw now this threat of knight takes with a fork. So king to d8 solves both of those problems. It protects the knight on c7, and now it prevents a fork as well. Knight takes on c7 anyways. King takes on c7, and now d5. Just marching these pawns down Broadway. This d pawn is a passed pawn, and Magnus is determined to make the most of it. Bishop develops to c5 with a tempo. This comes with check. Magnus blocks with the bishop, and now we have a trade of bishops, but this just allows Magnus's king to get closer into the center of the board and into the game. King to d7 by his opponent, rook to c1, getting it on an open file, and now cutting the king off from the c file and the queen side. Now king to d8. d6, pushing this pawn for all it's worth. Bishop to d7, preventing it from being pushed anymore. And now a beautiful rook lift to c7, now attacking the b7 pawn. The king can't take the rook because it's protected by the pawn, and this is just a suffocating position if you're playing with the black pieces. So we have rook to b8, protecting this pawn on b7, and now you can see that these pieces are just not active at all. The rook is only purpose in life is to guard this b7 pawn. This bishop is not doing much. This rook is not going to get into the game anytime soon. It's on h8, whereas Magnus's bishop is and rook are very active. The rook is on the 7th rank. The bishop is eyeing this b7 pawn and controlling a lot of squares along the way. So just a much better position with the white pieces. And indeed, it's a double attack on the pawn. So Magnus says, I'm going to be up a pawn, takes on b7, rook takes, bishop takes. And now the king is still cut off from the c file because the bishop is taking away the c8 square along with the pawn on c7. So we have e6 by black here trying to break up this pawn structure, but Magnus correctly ignores it and plays a really nice sort of Magnus retreat, which is bishop to e4. I feel like Magnus does this a lot where he has a really nice remaneuvering of the bishop, and now after black takes on e5, Magnus takes on e5, and all of a sudden Magnus has two passed pawns, both in the center of the board and both ready to just move forward and end the game for Magnus. h6 here, trying anything here with the black pieces, king to d4, improving the position of the king, and all of a sudden you can sort of see the king and the bishop and the pawns coming forward, and the enemy king does not have, it's going to be tough to escape this sort of net. Bishop to d6, preventing the king from coming to d5, but now rook to c2, cutting off the c file and getting ready to sort of lift to the 7th rank and possibly beyond. We have king to d7, getting off the back rank, but now rook to c7 check, and the king is forced back to the 8th rank. The 7th rank is taken away, as is c6, so the king moves back to d8, and now bishop to c6, threatening this rook to d8, d7 move with check. Doesn't work for the moment because the light squared bishop is guarding it here on d7, but that's sort of the idea. Rook to e8, getting this rook finally into the game, but Magnus now just gobbles up a pawn on a7, and now he has two passed pawns on the a file and b file. So this is just going to be tough to play against. Bishop to d7, offering a trade. Magnus says, I do not want to trade. Instead, I would like to checkmate your king, and plays rook to ace a8. The king has nowhere to go because the pawns are taking away. Sorry, this pawn, singular, is taking away these two squares. So you have to block with the bishop, and now Magnus plays just the wonderful d7 move. Forking the bishop, forking the rook. I don't think this is the best move technically, but it's a pretty stylish move. d7, it's protected by the bishop, so you can't take it with the king. Sorry, you can't take it with the king. The bishop cannot take it because it's pinned to the king by the rook, and this is an awesome pawn. It's forking these two pieces. Now you're threatening to take with the rook with check, and this is just completely game over. So here, the king moves to e7, and now Magnus actually misses a mate here. Maybe he saw it and wanted a more stylish mate, but here it's checkmate. If you take the rook and promote to a queen, the king now has nowhere to go. The bishop is guarding the queen, and the queen is taking away all of these squares, while the mighty pawn here on e5 is taking away d6 and f6. So this would be checkmate, but Magnus doesn't go for that quite yet. Instead, he takes the bishop on c8. And here, black just tries to prevent the pawn from queening, but now just rook takes on d8, king takes, and now Magnus, sort of a slow, deadly move, king to d5, and you can see the pressure of this bishop, this king, and this pawn marching up the board is going to be too much for the enemy king. g5, just hoping that Magnus falls asleep, and the pawn can queen here on g1, e6, g4, king to d6, g3, and now Magnus finishes the game in style with e7, and this is checkmate. The pawn is obviously checking the king is protecting the pawn, this pawn is taking away these two squares, the king and bishop are protecting the pawn, and the king here is stopping c7. The enemy king cannot escape on c7. The bishop's actually not doing it. Obviously, the bishop is very important in this attack. It's not doing anything in this position. This would be checkmate without the bishop, so it's kind of nice. The king and two pawns delivering checkmate. And it was really cool. As soon as Magnus did this, he jumped up and screamed. He's like, yeah, and he started singing. And again, I think it's cool to have someone who's so good at chess, but also just has so much genuine fun playing it on his own time, and it's a cool video, which I'll link below. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Definitely not the highest level game we've ever seen, but certainly a fun game. And again, remember, each player had 30 seconds on the clock, so we can't judge them too much if they're not making absolutely the best moves. So thanks for watching. Drop a like, drop subscribe. Let me know of other games you'd like me to review, and we'll see you next time.